Today we're here to demystify themed entertainment. We're talking about a critical component to an outdoor lighting system that's infrastructure, and specifically this thing we call the SPRK box. The key to lighting control outdoors is this guy right here, which we call the SPRK box. We're going to take a behind-the-scenes deep dive to look at how we fabricate these enclosures, some of the components we use, and why we've landed on this system for outdoor lighting control. So in our industry, we don't often talk about lessons that are learned as our craft evolves. Hopefully, we're all getting better at what we do over time. And yeah, I'd like to think that my first project and my most recent project, that you can see the growth in artistry and the growth in expertise. So let's talk about something nobody else is talking about. Let's say what didn't work about our first version of this box and why we've elected certain components now because we believe they're the right choice. So problem number one, we used really massive boxes. Although it gives a lot of room to work inside, the form factor is really hard to hide out on a property. It's a lot harder to build theming for a 48-inch by 48-inch box than this little guy is here, which is, not much bigger than a lunchbox. Number two challenge, we insisted in our first few versions on mixing low voltage and high voltage inside the enclosure. So we ran AC power inside. We distributed AC power in the same way you can imagine, power strips and adapters and that sort of thing, had the electronics in, and when everything was waterproof, that was great. What we discovered is particularly power supplies that are passively cooled, so they don't have any fan or there's no active cooling, drove our box temperatures up really high. So step one, we decided to decouple high voltage and low voltage. In this latest design of our box, everything inside is low voltage. That means it's a class 2 device, and the power supply sits external. That's a class 1 device. It's taking incoming AC power and making 24 volt power. So that was a big step. We had a few failure issues with overheating in some of the boxes, so getting the power supply outside, big win. Number two, our first round of boxes required a Phillips screwdriver to open, and they had little plastic tabs. Again, great idea, but after updates and service, the tab started to deform and it became harder and harder to take a Phillips screwdriver and open that tab. So we've abandoned that box series all entirely. Now we're using this box, which is standard on all of our projects. A few features of this box that we love. So first of all, it's a hinged opening. 2 quick releases to get inside, makes access easy for service. Number two, the form factor, much smaller, a lot more compact, about the size of a lunchbox. Tons of options here for mounting. There are stainless threads in all the corners. There are all kinds of adapter kits, so we can actually put this on a pole if we wanted to, which is great. This is also a domestically produced product. So our shop, just like lots of folks during COVID, learned a lot of lessons about supply chain. Some of these components actually in this box became really, really hard to source because of the chip shortage issue. We also found that some of the boxes that we had sourced globally or sourced over in Asia became a problem because of lead time. They were available in smaller quantities, but the shipping and the transit time was a real killer. So we've switched to a domestically produced box that then we outfit and configure in our shop. We also drill all the holes on the outside of the box. That's all done inside of our shop. So it broke our dependency on Asia for product supply. So now we can produce these a lot faster, which typically most projects are demanding. So another thing we did wrong in version 1, I was really a fan of these Platinum Tools RJ45 connectors. There's like a weatherproof shell that goes over the top, or supposedly weatherproof. In our experience of doing projects, those fittings never stayed watertight. So great idea, really cool, but it just didn't work. So we've landed on a strategy now where we avoid any kind of specialized fitting. We're only using one kind of fitting, and that's a PG gland. So PG glands are standardized in a variety of different sizes. So we've picked a couple of sizes that we tend to favor for cables. So all of the data cables, so like a Cat5 cable with an RJ45 connector, instead of entering into one of these ports with the little supposedly waterproof cover over top, we're running that cable in and then terminating it once it's inside the enclosure. All right, so let's take a peek inside the current version SPRK box. So here we have an Avitec Pixelite 16. It's a card that drives both pixels and DMX output. Main power comes in on these two lugs, and then the 8 outputs on either side are driving pixels or DMX outputs. Little LAN port there to sit on the network. What's interesting about this Avitec card, so it actually has holes that are intended like PC standoffs. So if you've ever built a PC before, they're real short, like little brass risers that you use to hold the PCB, to hold the motherboard off the case. And so we're doing the same thing here. This box has a plastic insert, a back plate, and we're configuring that back plate for each project. So we're using actually PC standoffs, just like you would building a PC, to hold this card off the plastic backdrop. Over here, this is a DMX King eDMX4. We love the DMX King products for distributing DMX data across projects. Cost is right. They're rock solid in performance. And so this is DMX King products have a little attachment that allows them to mount to DIN rail. So we're using a piece of DIN rail here to hold that card. In the corner here, we have a network switch, but not just any network switch. We wanted a 24-volt powered network switch so that everything inside this box would all be powered off a single 24-volt signal. So we went into like industrial automation, so people that are making controls for CNC machines and that sort of thing. And believe it or not, a DIN rail mount 24-volt network switch is a common item. So we're sourcing that from kind of a different industry, but that maintains low voltage class 2, only 24-volt power in the entire box. We have terminal blocks here that mount to DIN rail. We're using those to distribute the 24-volt power signal from the external power supply and drop power to all the devices here in the enclosure. The reliability of a lighting control solution hinges on infrastructure. Now, don't get me wrong, nobody wants to spend a ton of money on infrastructure because you don't necessarily get credit with that with the guests, but we also have expectations that the lighting solutions we install are going to operate year-round, every weekend and every day of the year. In order to do that, we need infrastructure that's solid and reliable. So step number 1, keep water away from our stuff. So the weather enclosure is really important because electronics don't do so well out exposed to the elements. And even silly little things like this cover has a gasket. If we had water leaking through the cover, if we had water leaking through one of the ports, we actually had a project where we showed up and one of these boxes was like submerged under like 12 inches of water. And believe it or not, everything inside was still working, which is, again, hard to believe. So a waterproof enclosure is really the foundational element of a lighting control solution. So then once we start putting electronics inside, it becomes really important that those electronics are, 1, super reliable, which all of our stuff is, and then 2, that we can monitor the state of those items remotely. So all these devices sit on a network, so it's very easy for us to poll the network and make sure that all those devices are online. It's really easy also for us to support this project remotely. So when we log into a lighting control system that we've installed and there's a malfunction with a card, we're able to go get to that card, modify things. In fact, we've had clients that have taken hardware failures, we've shipped them a new card, they drop the card in, we've configured the whole thing remotely. So network-based, really important, waterproof, really important, and then value. This box with full assembly from our shop is still a very moderate price. The electronics we've used inside, which that also drives the economical price point, they are reliable and rock solid, but they're not overbuilt. We could use different electronics in this box. There's certainly other people that make devices that do the same thing. We like this particular product lineup because it really strikes that reliable but still value price point. We just don't want to overspend on infrastructure. Yes, it needs to be reliable and robust and serviceable, but we don't want to put more money into infrastructure and take away from guest experience dollars.